Okay, so I've had a number of people request that I make a video of how to integrate all of the facial scan and intraoral scans in Exocad Blue Sky plans. So that's what I'm going to do. So for starters, I can't stress enough that you need to utilize the software of the Shining 3D Metismile to do your stitching. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to start out by starting a new order. We'll put in my name, and I'm just starting with the intraoral scan. All right, so I just need to put something in here, doesn't matter what, and then antagonist. We'll save this, and then we'll scan. So I'll be quiet and probably time-lapse this just to get through it quick. All right, we'll do now the lower scan. Okay, there's our lower scan, and now we'll just do a quick bite. And we'll finish that. Okay, so there's our finished intraoral scan. I'm going to click OK and accept it. And now we'll go to send this. And I want to point out that you could use any intraoral scanner you want. I happen to have the Shining 3D Aoral Scan 3 here, the wireless one, which I love, but you don't have to have that to integrate it with the Metismile. All right, so let's now export this data. And what's very important, regardless of what scanner you're using, you can do any of these file types you want, but when you pull it into your Metismile, you need it to be a PLY file. Very important, because it's not going to want to pull in anything else. All right, so I'm going to accept that. And there is my folder, which contains OBJ and PLY files for my intraoral scans. All right, so I'm going to just minimize that for a second, and I can finish the intraoral scan out, and we could close that. Now I'm going to launch the Metismile, and we're going to do, again, a new case. Choose whatever type you want here, and this is the important part. You want to rely on the Shining 3D software to do all of this stitching and not do it in Exocad. All right, so I'll make that clear of why here in a bit when I can contrast it to the stitch in both Blue Sky and in Exocad. But just take my word for it and import your intraoral scan right now and not later on in the process. Don't try to just do a facial scan and then stitch your intraoral scans after the fact. Okay, so I'm going to import my intraoral data. If you were using some other scanner, then you're just going to simply click here, find that file, and then pull in one for the upper. In fact, I'll just do that. And again, you can see here, it's looking for an OBJ. So I should have mentioned, if you're doing this from a different scanner, you can bring in OBJ or a PLY. It's just not going to let you do STL only. All right. Now, since I just exported this from the Shining, the BEB, I believe, is a proprietary file type to them. And so I need to bring in the upper jaw. So now you see that I have the upper jaw saved here, and now I need to also click on this one. It'll take you to the same folder, and we're going to click lower jaw. All right, so you see how there's a pink and a pink here. If you are using a Shining 3D scanner, you could also just import the project file, but that won't apply to those of you who are using a different scanner, say a Metit, a 3Shape, something like that. All right, so we're finished there. And now we're ready to begin doing our facial scan. All right, so I'm going to save my order, and now I'll scan.
Please aim your face at the viewfinder frame. and keep a proper distance. Three, two, one.
Okay, that's all we needed. All right, so I didn't capture a ton, just I'm doing this on myself and it's a little awkward, but that's perfectly fine for what we need to do here. You can cut out any data you don't want and delete that, and that looks good. Okay, so here's the other thing. You don't have usually enough data from just the smiling image to stitch to, so I highly recommend that you would also do a retracted. So if you hit the plus sign here, you can go to face with mouth retracted. So I'm going to stick in my little retractors and we'll do just a second scan.
Three, two, one.
Okay. So that should be it for scanning. All right, so there's my retracted, here's my smiling, and now what's left is we have to stitch all of this data together. All right, so let's go to face align. So it's going to first have you do your intraoral scan to the facial scan. And this is where, again, if you only have the smiling and they don't show much teeth, it's not going to have any data to stitch to. So you should take a retracted, and that's the one that you want to actually stitch to, is this one with the mouth retracted. All right. Now it's got an auto align feature, and this works very well most of the time. We'll try it on occasion, it fails, and when it does, it's a really easy fix. So let's just go ahead and click on auto align, and it worked perfectly, as you can see here. Now, how do we know if we can trust this? How do we know if this is a good stitch? The answer is you need to go down here to these two circles and go to occlusion view, and that is what you're looking for. Now, this is why I'm going to tell you, don't try to stitch these in Blue Sky or Exocad, because you don't have the benefit of this. Exocad's best fit matching has such a small scale that it's going to make it really difficult for you to know if it's a good stitch. You can eventually get there, but it can be difficult. Facial scans are inherently less resolution to them, right? They're good accuracy, low resolution. Intraoral scans are insanely high resolution. But when your scale, like an Exocad, is only like 1/10 or 2/10 of a millimeter, there's too much variance there. So you only get a few squirrely little lines that tell you that it's a good match, versus here, it's intended for this purpose. Usually Exocad's matching a model to a model with super high resolution. It's not really optimized for facial scans. So here, if I have virtually all of the maxilla in green, and I wouldn't put too much weight on the mandible, because your intraoral scan's probably taken at a completely closed VDO. Facial scan, they might have had their teeth apart or whatever, but the maxilla stays fixed relative to the face. So if your maxilla is almost all in green, you've got a good stitch there. Okay, so that looks great. Now I need to go and stitch the faces together. So I've got these two. All right. And let's once again try the auto stitch. So we've got these two faces. Let's try the auto align. And that looks great. But how do we know? Well, think about what changes between these. My forehead, nose, all of that should be relatively constant. But once I insert retractors versus when I'm smiling everything around the mouth and the jaws I would expect to change. So when I go to that same little heat map that shows the match, that's exactly what you see. Everything up here is virtually identical. It's all in the green. And then the facial muscles used in smiling or where my lips are retracted are going to be way off. So I can't rely on them. So that looks great. Now I do want to show you how would you address this if the auto align fails. You know, their hair falls different and it changes a lot of aspects to it. How would we do that? I'm going to go into enter manual align, and it's going to say please double click on the two models to select 3 corresponding points. So let's go canine, central, canine, canine, central, canine, and then just click manual alignment, and we should get essentially the exact same stitch here. All right, once again, everything's dialed in. And it's the same way with your intraoral scan. If the intraoral to the face fails, then do the manual like I just showed there. All right, so let's go to pre-design. We've got everything here. One other important thing that you want to do, because it's easier done here than it is once you get to Exocad, is you want to choose the lip line extraction. Okay, so when I hit the auto extract button, it's going to throw up a proposal there, and that's actually pretty good. I don't really think I need to mess with that, but if you want to, you can move the nodes around, or you can draw what you want to extract manually. But you're only going to do this on the smiling picture, because you want to have one facial scan of them smiling where you can see their teeth. But then if you do, say, a design or a wax up in blue sky, you want to be able to see through that to your design, right? So that's only going to matter on the smiling design. All right, so we've got that. We're going to go ahead here. Once we've got the line where we want it, we're going to click the button right here that says slicing. And now you can see there's my natural teeth from the intraoral scan underneath the facial scans, and we could toggle on any of these that we want to. You can look at the texture of these. So if I were to turn these guys off, and look here, this is what I mean, high accuracy, low resolution. Okay, so the resolution there is not sufficient to use Exocad's best fit matching. It is so much better when you do it here, and then all the data is already stitched. So when you pull it into Exocad, you're going to be ready to start work and not spend all this time aligning things. And once again, it can be from any intraoral scanner as long as it's OBJ or PLY. So now, go to send. And I want to export all of this data. Choose whatever file type you want. I'm going to do everything here. OBJ, STL, PLY. All right, so if you choose to do all of those, you're going to have a bunch of files because they're in all 3 file types. But notice here, you're going to have face open. That's going to be the one where you're retracted. You've got face, smile, lip line. That's the facial scan of you smiling, but with the lips extracted. And then you've just got face, smile. That's the basic facial scan, which still has your teeth. But then beyond that, look, you've also got your lower jaw and your upper jaw in all those file types because it's already stitched here. I could show that to you by opening one of these up. I'm going to just do it in STL so that I can bring it into Mesh Mixer. All right, so that's just pure STL from that smiling. And then I'm going to bring in, from the same folder, let's do the upper jaw. And do you see how those are already stitched here? That's what we want. Okay, so that's going to make my job a lot easier. So let's just now bring this data into Exocad so you can kind of see how we would use this and how much worse the stitching is when we do it there. Okay, so I've opened Exocad and I want to show you how now I bring all this data in and use it in Exocad for doing, let's say, a wax up on myself for aesthetics. And I'm going to show you the advantages of using it, the way that it's going to export from Shining 3D, but then also if you don't do that, how you're going to have to approach it and why I recommend that you take the approach I've shown already. So I've chosen my prescription here. I'm going to do a anatomic pontic from just premolar to premolar, and we'll save that and we'll go ahead and design. Okay, so this is the folder that has all of the files after I stitch them in the Shining 3D Metismile software. Okay, so this is different than if you have your independent intraoral scans and then you just did facial scans. That's what I don't recommend, and I'll show that too, but this is if you did do it the way I'm suggesting. So we need upper jaw first. I'll bring in the OBJ. Then we're going to get the lower jaw OBJ. All right, we can set our orientation. Excuse me. Okay, and before I start dropping teeth models in, I'm going to jump over to expert mode because now I need to bring in the facial scans. So let's go to Tools, Add or Remove a Mesh, and we want to import a facial scan. So let's load that. And you can bring all of these in, right? You would do it by the same process, but really the one, since I know these are already stitched properly, the one that's going to be beneficial to me is the smiling face smile, or the smiling face scan where I've cut the lip line out. That's the one that's going to be most useful for doing your designs in Exocad. And here's the beauty of this. There's no stitching. Remember, they were already stitched within the Metismile software, so I can tell it, yes, that mesh is already stored relative to the data I've already brought in, and thus there's no stitching to do. You see how everything is lined up? So now I could click OK, I could go back into my wizard, and now we could begin the process of doing the wax up. Okay, so I've thrown the teeth in there and just done some rough positioning, but now you begin to appreciate how much value this provides you because we can see the lip line relative to the face. We can see the midline. We can see all of that stuff. We can see the buccal corridors. You've now got everything you need to do your smile design here, right? So I'm not going to do it. I just wanted to show you how you would pull the data in. Now let me show you the other side of this. So if you didn't do as I suggested and stitch it in the Shining 3D software, let me show you what that would look like. All right, I'm going to hide this facial scan. We'll go back to expert mode now. And let's bring in a different facial scan. So I'm going to go to Tools, Add or Remove a Mesh. I'm going to do another face scan, but this time I'll bring in, let's say, that retracted. Okay, so imagine you didn't stitch all this stuff in Metismile. So the one that you're going to have to bring in first is the one that's retracted, that shows all the teeth, and you're going to have to stitch that to your maxillary model. All right, so let's find face open. And I'm going to tell it that this is not stored relative, because if you didn't do it the way I'm suggesting, it won't be. It'll be just out here in space somewhere, and you're going to have to manually stitch this. So that's a much less precise process, and I think you'll appreciate why the big advantage of this is that you've already got everything stitched relative to one another. All right, so we're going to have to now take this unoriented facial scan and pull it and stitch it to these models. All right, so let's go to Align Meshes, and this is where you would have to do your matching points. So I would say K9, K9, you're gonna have to do 3 points, central, central, and then let's do K9, K9. All right, so we can perform the alignment and best fit match it now. And it's going to do it, okay? Especially this one, it did relatively good, but Here's the big question for you. How do you know that's a good stitch? Again, I keep referring back to this issue of high resolution, low resolution. Well, look at Exocad's scale here, all right? The scale for whether something matches up only goes up to a maximum of 1/10 of a millimeter. Well, just from the muting of corners and things like that in the lower resolution facial scan, you're gonna lose so much of that detail, and thus you're gonna have minimal points where you really do get a true match. Now, just having used this a ton, I can look at this and tell that yes, that is a good match. You know, I can play with the facial scan, and it does look like that's lined up. But again, how can you be confident? And in a lot of other cases where I've done this, I'll look at that color map and I still don't have enough confidence. Let's say if there were fewer teeth, let's say if there are fewer stitching points, you know, all kinds of scenarios where you might not be able to look at that color map and really make heads or tails of it. And thus you end up with lots of guesswork. And guesswork is exactly what we're trying to avoid. If I'm doing a smile design, this facial scan is only useful in as much as it's properly stitched to the intraoral scans. If it's not, I can trick myself into thinking, you know, I need to pull incise the ledges longer or do any number of things that I really don't need to do. Okay, so I don't love that aspect of it. Can you make it work? Yes, you can. But this is not the ideal way to do this. So, and then, you know, after doing this, you would have to accept it, and then you would have to pull in the smiling scan, right, and stitch it to that face. So you're just making a lot more work for yourself, but beyond that, your certainty of a good stitch is much less when you take this approach with it, okay? So with that said, now let me show you how I might do the exact same thing and bring it into Blue Sky Plan, because it becomes even more advantageous to do it the way I'm suggesting in that program. Okay, so now we're going to do the same kind of thing in Blue Sky, and I'll show you the right way as I suggested, and then the difficult way. Take your pick. This is a CT scan of myself. All that I've done here is launch Blue Sky Plan and open the CT. So if you've used this, you know that as soon as you do that, the very first thing it's going to prompt you to do is to import an STL model. So let's go ahead and click that. And again, you need to navigate to the folder where you exported everything from the Metismile software already oriented. All right. And the thing that you always want to stitch first is your upper jaw, because the upper jaw stays consistent to the skull. It doesn't change. You know, that's the one we want to do. And then we're going to just pull everything else to that, not individually stitch them all. All right, so I'm going to click upper jaw. Blue Sky Plan does automatic stitching. So here we have the choice to just say, is that a mandibular or maxillary model? It's a maxilla, and we'll let the auto stitch take over. Okay, so the auto stitch appears to have worked well. I'm going to reset my panoramic curve here very quickly. And now let's just verify the stitch, make sure that everything looks like it's lining up. This one was actually a difficult one because I took this CT scan in a closed bite position, but that looks like a great stitch. I'm going to check it here as well. Everything looks like it's matched up. Okay, so at this point we have just the maxillary model stitched into our CT. And here again is the beauty of those files all having been stitched outside of the program. So once again, like in Exocad, I'll show you the right way, the wrong way. So now, if I wanted to bring in the facial scan, for example, I could simply open up that folder and grab any one of those. So first of all, for example, let's bring in the lower jaw. So here's the STL file for the lower jaw. Let's drop that in. Now this is the different step. You know, normally if you bring in an intraoral scan and you want to stitch it to the CT, then I would just say maxilla or mandible. Again, maxilla doesn't change. It's always the same. But Sometimes your CT scan you take at an open bite, sometimes a closed bite, and it's always going to pull that intraoral scan to the CT, which if it was in an open bite might not be what you want. You might want the models in occlusion so that you can design whatever, wax up, hybrid, anything like that. So if you don't want to stitch to the CT, and obviously a facial scan, you don't have the option to stitch the CT, then when this comes up, just hit the X. All right, and what I want you to see is that now that intraoral scan is sitting out here in space. At one time, it was properly related to this, but we've pulled this into blue sky, changed its orientation, stitched it to the CT. So really all I want to do is apply that same coordinate change to this lower model that I did to the upper. How do you do that? So go to Panels, Model Manipulation. You're going to say this is a mandibular model. We've got it chosen right here, and we want to tell it to stitch it to another model. And what destination model do we want to pull it back to? To the green one, the upper intraoral scan. So when I click OK, and you saw that little option to check of using points, don't check that. Remember, these were in orientation already. You just want to restore that just into Blue Sky's new coordinate system. All right, so we brought that in. That's your lower. Let's grab now a facial scan. So I want to use the, let's say the one that has the lip line cut out. So let's find that one. That would be right here. Drag it over. Once again, don't try to stitch it because you don't even have data to stitch this to. There's my face. It's off kilter. It's out of orientation, but I just bring it back to the model orientation of that maxilla. And now we have it. Okay? So now when you turn this stuff off, we could make these tooth-colored models. I could have brought in the OBJs of the teeth and had, more realistic color. I just didn't. I needed teeth whitening anyway. But now I can see what I need to see for doing my smile design, making a restoration, whatever I want to do. Okay? So that is the correct way. Do all your stitching in the Metismile software, and then just pull them back into orientation in Blue Sky or Exocad. Now let me show you how you're going to have to approach this if you don't do it the way I'm suggesting. Right? So let's say you did your intraoral scans in a Metit, and then you just did your facial scans in your Metismile. You didn't take my advice, you didn't stitch them in the Metismile software, now you just want to stitch them in Blue Sky. Well, good luck. It's going to be a very difficult process. So let's say import a face scan. This is the kind of manual way, and it's not easy. So let's think about which one do you have the most data to stitch to. Well, the retracted facial scan is the one that's going to show the most of the teeth, and that's all you've got to stitch to. So we're going to have to bring in the face open, right? So there it is. Let's open that. All right, and there is a little bit of this stitching mechanism, but I'm just going to be honest, it's not all that functional right now. We're going to need to put two corresponding points. K9 and K9, and then it wants you to put one additional point on the nose. So I'll click on the nose, and now click next. All right, you see that's not all that useful to me. And everything else I've got to now do with this manual widget, and I just don't have enough data to get an accurate stitch here. All right, I mean, I mentioned this earlier, but if you can't be absolutely confident in the stitch of this, I think you're worse off than to proceed than you would have been to not use a face scan at all. So I'm going to just click OK on this. The only way I know of to somewhat verify that this is correct. Okay, and first of all, it's asking us to define the lip line. I don't care about that here, so I'm just going to X out of this little wizard thingy. And in the process of doing that, I've lost this. And so, again, that's not going to work. So let's now let's just drag and drop it right in here. Metismile open. All right, and this is going to be 100% a manual job. All right, you've got this out here, and what I'm going to need to do is try to stitch this to the CT scan or to another model. So I could take this face scan, say I want to stitch it to another model, and I want to stitch it to the upper jaw again because that's the one that remains consistent. But this time, remember, we're operating under the assumption that you did these independently. So I'm going to have to use it manually by aligning with points. So when I do that, I'm going to have this model on the left, and I'm going to have my face scan on the right. And I'm going to just have to click corresponding points on each of them. So let's go with dead middle of the canine, dead middle of the canine. Let's go incisal corner here. And then let's maybe say gingival margin of that canine. And let's just do a manual stitch. All it does there is just line up the points. Again, how can I be confident though? You know, in this program, I don't have a like a heat map that shows it. So I've got to essentially verify that manually. So I'm looking there. Is it close? Yeah, it's close. It's not necessarily dead on. And the only way I know of to verify whether or not it is to now change your model outline on the face to something other than that black color and start verifying it in your various windows. Okay, so looking here, again, is it close? Yeah, but is it perfect? No, it's not. You see how these teeth are falling well outside of that? That's closer, but that tells me that I've got a little tipping somewhere. You can also try to look at soft tissue boundaries. So I can make out the soft tissue in my CT scan, and these clearly are not perfectly matched up, nor would I expect them to be because, again, retracted in the facial scan, so distorted soft tissue, and just at repose in the CT scan. Now the nose ought to be somewhat matched up, and I see that it's not either. So now you get left with this dilemma of trying to fine-tune this based on model outlines, right? Trying to drag this over, you know, scoot things up or down. And I find it useful to hit F5 and go to this MPR view because that gives you some different views, like a true cross section through the head that I can look at. So when I'm looking right here, it tracks pretty well along the nose, but as I get up here, you see how it comes off the forehead? So maybe I would have to rotate this back a little bit and then pull it down some and maybe back some. But my point in showing all this, I simply do not do it this way. I don't like it. It's not accurate enough. And so the point in saying all this is if you have a Metismile, then do yourself a favor. In my opinion, the number one advantage to that particular facial scanner is that awesome stitching software that brings it all together, whether you're using their intraoral scanner or not. It will bring it all together natively within their software. It does it accurately. You can verify it due to that larger scale color map. And now it's all oriented, so when I go into whatever program, Exocad, 3Shape, Blue Sky, I'm not relying on doing this, okay? I've spent hours trying to do this kind of manual stitching to really just get close and still not have a ton of confidence that we're really good. So the ultimate point in all this is if you want to make your life easy, utilize that software to its advantages, let it stitch things, and then pull them into your other programs for your design of whatever you're doing, okay? But that's just one man's opinion. What do I know? So anyway, I hope you found that helpful, and we'll see you next time.